Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to Boundless Authenticity. A big thank you to all our new subscribers and followers. If you're not following the show yet, be sure to hit that follow button right now. Boundless Authenticity is available on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Rumble, and sometimes YouTube, of course, when they're not censoring my ass. I recommend using the Spreaker app because it's free and there's no sign up needed. You just have to hit play and enjoy. By subscribing, you'll get notified when new episodes drop and you'll help the show reach more listeners, which obviously means we can bring on the guests that you want to hear from. New episodes drop 3 times a month, the 6th, the 16th, and the 26th. So mark your calendars. Today's guest is Justin L. Shaw. He says he's a little bit Deepak and part Tupac. And we're about to find that out, honestly. And he's all about healing with a healthy dose of humor. He's a former stand-up comedian turned spiritual guide. At least I think so. Justin's journey from heavy drug addiction to emotional enlightenment is as crazy as it is inspiring. Drawing from the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, Justin's own 13 rungs of Sourcery don't just target drug and alcohol issues. They tackle everything from phone addiction to soul-sucking materialism. Because let's face it, spiritual bankruptcy can take many forms. So if you're ready to laugh your way to a healthier soul, Justin's got you covered. Justin, how's it going?
Great, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good over here in sunny Barbados, where it's always steamy hot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sunny Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm at, and it's a different kind of hot. It's sauna over steam room here.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Today's a warm one for sure.
Yeah. So you were a former stand-up comedian. Why'd you stop?
Well, good question. So I have suffered from all kinds of mental/emotional issues throughout my life. And, they've all all these things that I've been through all have one kind of similar root cause that's branched all these different things for me, like ADHD, and I've had depression issues and anxiety issues and substance abuse issues and all these different branches, but it's one root cause. Like we went over, it's that spiritual bankruptcy. And I stopped doing comedy because I moved to LA from Phoenix after college just to pursue a dream. I knew I was funny. I knew I could make people laugh. So I would do comedy there, just like in open mics, nothing major at all. Just open mics around the town. But I was always really high when I was doing it. Xanax in particular, opiates, just things that made me forget and get me more loose. I didn't have like panic attacks when I hit the stage. So things got really out of hand with drug addiction there. And I eventually went to rehab out in California and got sober. And then I tried to do stand-up comedy without the drugs. And although I felt funny, the panic attacks and the anxiety and being in that scene, that it's very much a scene that isn't too healthy for those of us with substance abuse issues. There's a lot of drinking and just that whole nightclub. I mean, and you have to wait all day before you go on stage. Like it's just anxiety riddled, and then the panic attacks and the bad scene. And I was just like, this isn't for me. So I just kind of gave it up and, put comedy in my pocket and realizing that now, I get to reinvent a whole new thing. And, I'd like to use this book to kind of become a mystical comedian is what I call it. It's not a thing until now, hopefully, and do kind of stand-up philosophy and kind of combine the two worlds of comedy. I see a lot of my spiritual leaders and teachers, and you have your comedians, and I don't see a lot of mixing in between the two. And I found that, like, wow, I could really, spirituality and trauma healing, and it doesn't have to all be serious. It sometimes needs to be serious, but it can be really fun and funny too. And so the book I wrote it's a cycling of laugh, think, feel, like I had to keep the shattered concentration of Generation TikTok. So I knew like I had to really keep people's attention, and the comedy really keeps people's attention. Like it really, like, you know, you laugh and then you feel something, you think, and then like, so I really, I leaned on my skills a lot to write this book, and I'm going to continue to lean on them. You know, I hope to do lectures and things like that. This is very much the beginning. The book's been out like 5 weeks, and like I have plans and visions for the future, but right now I just want to get that book out there and just let people know who I am. And then hopefully maybe people will show up and hear what I have to say.
Okay, so let's jump into the book's concept and the purpose, really. So the title of the book is Sourcery 101. Am I right? So
Yes.
13
yeah.
rungs. So tell us.
13 rungs to a higher elevation of consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. So explain what sorcery means in this context and how that connects to the idea of elevating your consciousness.
Yeah. So sorcery, let's get this straight here. So sorcery is spelled with a U. So this isn't, you know, you can leave your hooded robes and cauldrons in the closet for now, and you know, get your magic wands out when you're doing your Harry Potter thing. This is not Hogwarts, and I'm not Dumbledore. I'm not that kind of a sorcerer. My sorcerer is spelled with a U. So we're using source energy, which is where we all came from and where we're all going to, the energy that fills space to heal trauma and thrive, to heal and thrive. That's the two key points to sorcery. And I use that. So it's kind of, it's a step-by-step or rung-by-rung guide to become a sorcerer with a U. And so it is, and I kind of birthed it. I had all this stuff in my head, you know, after a series of horrible events and, you know, things in my childhood and just all these horrible things. And then in my adulthood, I had a series of 4 years where I had just 10 major things happen, you know, like major losses of all kinds of things, and just this horrible cycle of events that really brought me to my knees. And this is kind of what was birthed from it. And I had all this stuff in my head thinking like, I could really help people get through things. And I've learned so much, you know, because I was in such pain. All that made me feel good during my years of getting better and healing was just learning. And I learned so much stuff that I had to think about, how do I want to like organize this? And so I thought about the 12 steps. And so like, is like, you know, here's a system of healing that like helped people. But for me, there's a lot more that I needed out of AA that I did not get. And, you know, there's a focus on sobriety in AA, but there's no focus on thriving. It's just gets people sober. And my problem was I became stagnant, and I was sober and I was bored with my life. And so something happens, and then I was already looking for an excuse to go back out and drink and use, because I was just bored with AA, because I was not thriving. I was just sober. I kind of got sober. I was like, so now what? So there was just much more to be desired for this concept. And I knew that AA kind of has this symptom discrimination of, not only does AA, like separate between drugs, which originally the NA was an original offshoot of AA, because all the old timers and geezers didn't want to hear the hippies talk about their drugs in their alcohol meetings, without realizing, first of all, that alcohol is absolutely a drug. And so they offshoot, and all these different, all the different drugs have at different meetings, and everyone's separate and doing, like no one wants to hear, cocaine talked about in a heroin meeting, just all this crap. And they, they don't have meetings for a shopping addiction or a phone addiction. They just recently started doing meetings from like gambling, but it's all the same thing. So I started realizing like this is all the same thing. So I created a system where it's rungs. So, because moving forward is good. Steps forward is good, but moving up is better, because you get a better perspective on things. Like the bird has a better perspective on things than a worm. So I rungs to get a higher elevation of consciousness. So that's kind of where it all came from, and it's pretty fun and exciting, the whole thing, for sure.
That makes sense to me, because I think a lot of people get caught up in this fantastical idea of what spirituality is, that it should have a particular trajectory. It should end up at a particular destination. It should look a particular way. And then in reality, it's kind of just like climbing a ladder, but maybe the ladder is a little bit more than 13 rungs because
Yeah, it
like
never ends.
if you're coming up on something new, then you're just kind of like, Jesus Christ. And then you got to go up a little bit more and you're like, can't see it yet, you know? So
Yes.
yeah.
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 Yeah. No, it is a journey that never ends. It's kind of like having, you can't get to the top of Everest without a Sherpa. But spirituality is different than climbing Everest because there is no summit to climb. But I like to consider myself a spiritual Sherpa because what a Sherpa does not do is put you on his back and carry you to the peak. Sherpa is there to just simply guide you along. It's your journey. He's just there to guide you, but you also would get lost and die on the way up to the top of Everest without one. So I needed a spiritual Sherpa. I found lots of them, and now is like, I want to be one of those too.
Right. So with that point, why did you choose the number 13?
Good point too. So that is extremely important. So the number 13 is, so I came from a background of very Christian. I found kind of Christianity when I got sober and in my 20s, late 20s. And there was a lot of false beliefs I had to overcome that were really holding me back in my spiritual journey, really holding me back. I consider Christianity to be this amazing, beautiful mansion house that you see, but it's built on this cracked foundation of judgment and fear. So when I was living in my beautiful house of Christianity, all of a sudden my mother fell terminally ill, and it was bad. And so she ended up dying, but her dying days were absolutely traumatic for me because I had it programmed into me from my Christianity that because my mother never went to church and she wasn't a practicing Christian, that she was going to hell. And this made her dying days absolutely dreadful. Instead of being kind of this shepherd to the next life that I would be, I'd be super excited for, like, you're a glass of water getting poured back into the ocean, Mom. Like, it would have been so different and so healing for me. Instead, I was filled with dread and fear and just she probably didn't even want me there. Like, my energy was so bad. So after that whole thing, I really started questioning my beliefs. And the whole point of this 13, to get back to it, is because the number 13 is said in our culture to be unlucky. And apparently it's kind of like a Christian thing. One of the things is that there were 13 people at the Last Supper, and Judas was considered the 13th person. And so therefore 13 is unlucky. So it means absolutely nothing. And for some reason that caught on. And in society, 13 is extremely unlucky to the point where we don't have 13th floors in hotels. Like, this is ridiculous. 13 is actually a divine number. It is a number for the divinity. And it's actually said to bring good luck to those who embrace it. So I chose 13 very purposely in that one of the main concepts of Sourcery is to start questioning things that we believe that might not be true, things that we hold truth that might not be. So the number 13 kind of gets that going. So yeah, it was very important, number 13.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. All right.
Yeah.
Well, with that, then what's your definition of higher elevated consciousness? And if you could, just while you explain that, just bring in a moment from your life that was like, okay, I'm going to have to write this down.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we can do that. Yeah, for sure. So I started, so really this is about four years ago that I had my first experience that things are not what they seem to be, and started really like elevating myself and started to let going of old false beliefs and, letting spirit take over me and elevate that consciousness. And it happened at the time I was introduced to this shaman, and he started working with me on an individual level. And I got introduced to meditation. I'd always heard of meditation. I tried it, and I wasn't for that. The meditation stuff wasn't for me. Like, I just couldn't, my mind was like my mind was like my web browser. I had 4 tabs open, and 2 were frozen, and I had no idea where that music was coming from. So it was just a mess, a jumbled mess in there. So I really needed meditation, but I just gave up so quickly. So he started really honing me into it, and made me realize the importance of this, giving your mind a break, and how critical it is now. I mean, like, I do it every single day, but when I first started doing it, it was very difficult, and it didn't seem very rewarding. But after a while, I started to get better at it. And it's just like, a lot of people understand the body better than the mind. So it is much like going to the gym, where when you haven't been to the gym your whole life, and maybe you've been eating garbage and weigh 300 pounds, that first gym experience kind of sucks. But you, after repeated visits and keep going, you see yourself get stronger, you see your body changing, and it gets more fun. It starts to get you high, and you start liking it, enjoying it. But it's only repeated visits, and especially in the beginning, the first, especially month, really, because you're rewiring your brain and getting everything, creating good habits. And that's what meditation did for me. And I had an experience early on in meditation where drug-free, absolutely no drugs. A lot of people say, this is the kind of experience I hear people say when they talk about, like mushrooms or ketamine or something. And I had a similar experience, but I was completely drug-free. There was no drugs at all. I think I had coffee that morning. That was it. And so I had this experience to where it was about 3 hours. And it was just it was a bliss attack. Like, I've always had panic attacks, and like you can feel kind of an onset of a panic attack, and like the breathing heavy. And this was like a bliss attack. And it was truly transformative. And I just laid there on my bed, eyes open, like just having this bliss attack in my mind, at the same time realizing that I had been in airplane mode my whole life. Like, airplane mode, you turn on your phone when you go on the plane, and it blocks all the messages, like all the calls and messages. And like, when you get to your landing spot, you turn it off, all the messages come in. I felt like I had been on airplane mode my whole life. So all these things that all of a sudden I knew were true because they were coming from my higher self, the outside of the illusion. All these things realizations started coming to me, and started uplifting me. And as I was feeling amazing, and that's how I knew they were true, because I was just getting these waves of ecstasy that were incredible. And all these thoughts that were like, everything I thought in my life was, was all these things I thought were true were not true. And there is a force in the universe that is all around us at all times. And they say God is around us, but it's different than that. Science has a name for it even. It's dark matter. Although I don't like to think, it sounds nefarious. I'm not a big fan of that term, dark matter. I feel like I'm the dark matter. It's light matter. But it's like fish. When you go to a fish and you ask them about the water they swim in, they're going to say, what water? And it's like that. And this experience was like a fish that's been living in a pond its whole life. And all of a sudden it gets caught by an angler and pulled out into this whole new, like, majestic, insane reality it didn't have any idea existed. Like, what is this? So that's what it felt like. And that's what started really my new healing journey, and just kept going at like, this is okay. I need to chase this, and more people need to know about this, because this is something that should be taught in schools. Everyone needs to know about this. There is a force that can be used it's a sea of information, the Akashic field. It's everything that ever was and ever will be. And all this information is in there. And I tapped into it. I didn't write that book with my brain. The brain is the receiver. And I tapped into something that is all around us to write something that is well beyond what, a C+ college student could have ever wrote. Like, you read this, like I read it and I'm in shock that this came out of me because I was tapping into something that wasn't me. So yeah, it was not written with the use of my brain. I was tapping into something, that force, the Star Wars force. Star Wars really explains it so perfectly. Obi-Wan Kenobi says it's an energy field created by all living creatures, and it binds the universe together and energizes us, and that's exactly what it is. So I found the force, and that is what truly started me on my higher elevation of consciousness journey.
Okay. So what do you think pretty much sets your book apart from other works that would be in the same genre?
Well, it definitely humor, big time. It also has like with the humor, it has a lot of it's kind of, I'd say it's The Secret meets The Four Agreements meets A Million Little Pieces if it were written by Jerry Seinfeld. So it's got aspects of all kinds of things. It's got aspects of my life that I have a lot of really humorous stories in there from my times, and I make them funny, but I make them relevant to whatever I'm talking about. And I also use a ton of pop culture. So I grew up, part of my childhood was rather neglectful. So emotionally wise, it just was a very cold atmosphere, an emotional vacuum that I grew up in. And I gravitated and globbed on towards pop culture because that's what made me feel good. So all these movies from childhood, I'd watch 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and I'd watch them over and over again. And the music of that time period and the movies and the shows and the video games, and they're all extremely important to me. I'm a huge geek, nerd, whatever. So there's aspects of pop culture that I bring into this that was already programmed into me that is like, oh my gosh, I can mesh these two things. And I mean, I truly now believe, and I see the things that I grew up on in a different light, like Star Wars, like, holy, they have it right the whole time. So I see these things that I grew up on, and I'm able to like work them into the spirituality aspect. So I just believe that many of life riddles are hidden in the answers to many of life's riddles are hidden in the kind of the nooks and crannies of pop culture. So I use so many pop culture things to illustrate points. So I use humor and then pop culture, and I just make it a lot of fun. So, like there's some deep stuff to it for sure, but there's also a lot of humor and fun and anecdotes, and it's very different. I've never read anything that approaches it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I kind of get that vibe from it. And you know what? It's really good because that's kind of where you have to meet a lot of people. Oh, there's so many people out there that wouldn't know what to do without all of this other external crap that we have that's shoved down our throats from the time we're little, So you kind of have to get them where they can get involved, a little bit of familiarity on it. And it's great that you're wearing a Rage Against the Machine t-shirt because you already got my attention instantly.
Yeah, that's my Desert Island Shuffle is Rage Against the Machine, and Wu-Tang Clan. But Rage Against the Machine is just so great. I mean, even the band's name makes a statement. That's what I love so much about it. Like, I mean, all their stuff is fantastic too, but just the band's name is making a statement. Yeah, it's
exactly
the best, man.
Exactly, because I remember playing like Tony Hawk and you hear like Rage Against the Machine, and you're like, what the heck is that? And you're like, what is the machine, man? and
then you find out what the machine is. Yep. Yeah. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
They're making a statement with the name of their band.
Yeah. So what is the first rung that we should focus on?
So yeah, the first rung is called shadow work. And it is an important one because we all have a shadow. So when a soul is broken, it creates a shadow. Everyone has varying degrees though. So there are times in my life when my shadow has been running my life, and other times when it's just a good friend, like right now. It's so I told you about the pop culture. So one of the things I recommend in the book, because we are not the shadow. The shadow is the reactionary side to us that a lot of us want to work on and may not be too big fans of, people with anger issues or drug addict, it's that reactionary side to feeling uncomfortable in what we do. So we are the awareness of the shadow, not the shadow itself. So I recommend to people to name their shadow, to keep some distance from it, because it is not you. You're the awareness of the shadow, not the shadow itself. So I named mine Floyd because in Quentin Tarantino's classic, not Pulp Fiction, what was it? True Romance. Brad Pitt has a small cameo role in it, and he plays this roommate to one of the more central characters, and he's just this kind of loser stoner. He's always on the couch. He doesn't pay rent. He doesn't do chores. He just lies on the couch and does nothing. But the guy that owns the house doesn't kick him out of the house because he loves him like a brother. He obviously loves him, and he lets him stay even though he contributes absolutely nothing to his life. So I have named my shadow Floyd because he is that kind of stoner loser that isn't, he's not going to cause any harm to me as long as he's on the couch and I can love him like a brother, but kind of keep my distance. So the shadow is something that's really important to understand and embrace. And, one of the things, I think the healthiest person or I've ever seen with their shadow is Eminem. Eminem handles his shadow beautifully. So he names his shadow Slim Shady. He is aware that the shadow Slim Shady is not Marshall, and he says it over and over again. He embraces his shadow in that he's aware of this reaction. He had a dreadful childhood, all kinds of horrible trauma that created his shadow. He's very open with his drug addiction and his anger issues, and so he is aware that all these bad things that happened to him in his childhood has created this side of him that is not desirable and can destroy him if the shadow is in charge. And he talks about in many of his songs, when the shadow was in charge. He doesn't call it the shadow; he calls it Slim. But when the shadow has been in charge, and he was just horribly drug addicted and just fallen off, and so now he treats his shadow differently. He speaks. He lets the shadow speak, and then leaves it be. So I think he's the kind of peak attainable for people to try to understand the shadow. Like, find your Slim Shady, name it and deal with it in an appropriate manner. It can be in different ways, certainly, but to kind of feel the reaction is different than to let it go. We're always going to react to certain things. I can be I'd like to be, like the peaceful monk, but when someone cuts me off in traffic, there's a reaction that comes to it. But I'm at a point spiritually now where that reaction just dwindles so quickly. Whereas before, there was a point in my life in my 20s where there could have been a road rage accident. I could have followed that person home. I was really screwed up. So, we're always going to react to certain situations, but how long are we going to stay in that reaction? And that's when we kind of have some separation of the shadow and just, love it, love the shadow and just be like, I know you're pissed off right now, kind of talk to it, but this isn't that big a deal. Let's move on with our life. There's a healthy way for us to not be so reactionary. Yeah. And that's what shadow work is about.
So let's talk about distractions. How did you first become aware that there were so many distractions out there that were keeping you spiritually bankrupt, to use that term?
Yeah. Well, it's really easy to find, I talk about in the book, a big difference between happiness and joy. Huge difference. Happiness, I call them kind of what I was is a happiness chaser. So I'd go from different things that made me happy and just tried to constantly make myself happy. And in between those things, I was never happy. So if I wasn't using drugs or, there was all kinds of, sex can be, there's a million things that make us happy. And those things aren't necessarily bad. It's the attachment to them that brings the suffering. The attachment to these things just turns pain into suffering. And it is the running away from pain that makes it persist. Whatever you resist will persist. And you have to heal it, or you have to feel it to heal it. So distractions are very easy to find. And I'm very happy to say, like, I went completely, when I was this last year that I was really writing and putting the book together, I just made a goal that I was going to do healthy things and I was going to have no distractions. So I didn't go on dates. There was no drugs, no alcohol, I've been, and I'm going to continue the drugs and alcohol. Certainly, my life is so much better without that stuff. Let me tell you. But just really focus on my own healing and writing this book at the same time. So it's a very meta book. It's like creating the system and healing at the same time. I wrote the book for me, but after it was done, I was like, holy crap, this can really help a lot of people. So, I really secluded myself from a lot of distractions and stopped my happiness chasing. Joy is something that you find when you're not doing any of the things. Like, it's still going to make me happy to do food is a big one that makes me happy. There's all kinds of things and there's nothing wrong with that. But joy is what you have in between those happiness things. Exercise makes me happy, and there's all kinds of that are not bad. But I have now found joy, which is having joy in between these things that are kind of worldly things and distractions. Can be used as distractions, but once you find joy, then they actually make you happy. But joy is only found when you're in between your happiness chasing. And if there's no joy in between, doing things that you enjoy doing, search that.
Right. All right. So I got a question for you. It's an important one. When you personally look around society, whether it's the community that you live in, or, you see stuff on the internet, or you read books, or whatever your day-to-day experiences end up being, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to overcoming the mass spiritual bankruptcy and all of the toxic shit? That's the best word for it. It's just shit. It's just freaky, nasty shit that's going on in the world. What do you think is the biggest obstacle that people face?
Well, it's going to be different for everybody. Like, for me, it was probably drugs and alcohol. For someone else, it could be gambling. For someone else, it could be, sex. Everyone's got their big thing, and everyone knows what their thing is. But there's other things out there. So, it's very easy to be like, okay, I'm not going to do this thing, but I'm going to do this other thing. And so, the key is to turn inward instead of constantly turning outward. Because if you're constantly turning outward and there is no joy, and you're only just chasing happiness, something is wrong in there. There is something amiss. And it would be into anyone's best interests to look into them. Because the pain doesn't go anywhere. It's an illusion of running from pain. You cannot outrun it. You can't outrun it. It has to be dealt with. I mean, you can attempt to outrun it. You can, outrun it until you die, but then you die miserable. You could be a drug addict till you die. I guess you can try that. It's not a great life, but it does not. It remains. It does not go anywhere. So everyone's obstacle is going to be different. And it's a matter of rewiring your brain to get into healthy habits and stop running from the pain and just constantly chasing that happiness. It's very easy to find. But once you take the time to heal and really embrace healing and turn to healing and thriving and healthy things, like things change insanely quick. And it's a matter of doing those healthy things and getting in touch with your higher self, your intuition, and slowly going through that healing process really, really changes things for the best, for sure.
Right. So can you think of any influences that just weren't good for you? For example, like myself, I got into the sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture because I was a musician. But I think largely my perception of that was initially shaped by people like, Chris Cornell or Lane Staley and stuff like that, because that was what I was really into when I was a young kid. Long live 1991, I always say. So like, I mean, I know that stuff really deeply ingrained the idea that, okay, I should just avoid my stuff and go do drugs. And I took that with me throughout my teenage years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's influences certainly, but it's not necessarily everyone's influenced by spiritual bankruptcy when it comes down to it. Like people can hear. So those of us who have spiritual bankruptcies can be very easily influenced by these musicians and things. And, Eminem was big for me, certainly growing up, and, his whole thing at the time coming out, and, drugs and that was big in the 90s, right? Like that was kind of what it was. But, other kids that I saw that, didn't have the kind of spiritual bankruptcy I did, that had no effect or influence on them whatsoever. So really it comes down to the spiritual state of who it is. I mean, there's, it's just impossible to blame on, I can't blame anyone else. It's just, it's you, the spiritually bankrupt, connecting with another spiritually bankrupt person that has more success than you do. It's just, it has nothing to do with them, but it's everything to do with us and where we're at in our spiritual walk and journey. Because now there's no way anyone could possibly influence me. There's just no way. Like there's just no way. And obviously when you're younger, there's a little bit more influence too, but it's the spiritual bankruptcy when you're younger. That's when you're really highly influenceable. But now I'm at the point where I can, that's no one's gonna take me off of my course. Like it's just not gonna happen.
So when people read your book, what would you say is the biggest takeaway that you want them to have?
I would say hope. I like to think from dope dealer to hope dealer, right? Like, well, I wasn't a very good dope dealer. I always used my drugs and like never get high in your own supply from Scarface. That was like the phrase, have your cake and eat it too. Like, what the fuck else are you supposed to do with cake? Like, I was a terrible drug dealer. But I am now a hope dealer. And that is the main takeaway I want people to have, is that you can go from, I've spent, I've been many rehabs, park night, nights on park benches, jail, just horrible experiences. And it is possible to overcome that. Many deaths, just in recent years, just whole series of really nasty things happening to me. So that's in childhood and adulthood, and that's kind of covered in there a little bit. I don't go too deeply on it because, comparing war stories doesn't do a whole lot. Your pain you may have gone through more than I have, or maybe not as much. Then you kind of get into that whole thing. So pain is pain. And the reason we feel pain is because we are very spiritual beings stuck in a very physical world. So I would like people to get hope out of it. And even when if you can, maybe the world is against you, you would feel the world is against you, and maybe it is, but the universe is for you. And that's really all that matters.
That's fair. Okay. Well, you kind of covered everything I wanted to ask you. So,
Cool.
I mean, can I ask you another question? It just came to me. If there's anything that you wish you could share with your younger self, little Justin, what would that be?
Oh man, that's a good one. So I talk to my my inner child all the time. The kind of key for happiness, I think, for a lot of people is to keep that inner child happy. And when I'm feeling squirrely and weird things, like I can talk to my inner child, and it's a big part of my own healing. Sometimes I just get a picture and talk to it, and it like lets me know what's going on and what I'm feeling, and it's just an excellent way to process feelings. But for little Justin, it would be the number one thing is to start getting in touch with the intuition and your higher self, which is the self that is outside of the illusion, the simulation. I make the best argument for simulation theory in that book I've ever heard. And so that is the outside, that is you playing you on the other side. And once you get in touch with that and have that connection, you are now a player character and not a non-player character. And you have control of your life. The world is filled with NPCs. They're everywhere. And those are people just running programs. We're just robots running programs. And once you get in touch with your higher self, now you are in charge of your entire life. And that would be the number one thing. And there's a whole rung in there about instinct versus intuition. And there's a big difference. Most people use those interchangeably, instinct and intuition, but they're very, very different. Instinct is a fear-based guiding system, and intuition is your heart. So it's essentially instinct lives in the gut and intuition lives in the heart, and they're very different. You need your instinct in times of distress, and it's good that it's there. But when your instinct gets turned up too high, then you're constantly fearful of everything, and it interrupts with your life. So to heal from that and run things through your heart, I go through there in how to train your intuition in the book. And it's a series of asking yourself questions and putting your heart, you have to clear your mind through breathing techniques and start asking questions. You have to get a feel for the questions, though. First, ask a question that the answer is yes to, and you'll get a feeling. Maybe you'll get a word. You might hear something audible. You might get the word in your mind. It's different for everything. Color could be color. It's different for everybody, but you have to get a sense of what yes is. And then you ask a question that the answer to no is. So you get the feeling what no sounds like from your intuition. So you start asking this, and you start asking it questions every day, and you start training over 30 days and start with simple things. And, should I, go to this event? Should I call this person? And start getting in touch with that signal. And once you start getting in touch with that signal, it starts guiding you to your destiny, essentially. So, and that's what it has done for me. And it saved, this is a great one. It saved my life probably about 2 months ago. I was finishing up the book, and I just live in an apartment alone with my dog. And I was eating steak one evening, and I had swallowed a bite, and I swallowed it down, and it kind of got stuck. Nothing crazy. Instinctually, I would have just swallowed again and tried to, gulp and get it down. And before I could do that, louder than ever, in inner voice, not an audible, but an inner voice just went, "Stop." And I was and I stopped in my tracks. I was like, what is going on? And it talked me through, and it said, another swallow and you're going to die right here in your apartment. And so I'm sitting there what? And so and then I talk back to it, and I'm like, so what do I do? And it walks me through, it was lodged, but it wasn't to the point where I couldn't get air. So it said, just breathe in slowly, because you don't want to get relodged, and breathe in slowly, air around it, and then just shoot it out. And that's what I did. It just shot out. And it's stuff like that. Like, you know, your intuition will always lead you away from danger, whether it be of the emotional kind or of the physical kind. It may not be correct every time with little things you play with it, because you can ask future events and like I play with it sometimes, and you can ask these events with it, and it is right more than it is wrong, but sometimes it's wrong. But when it is and our emotions tend to get in the way with that sometimes. We kind of want something to be that way, and we want to hear, like, we want, even though, so like we'll be asking a question and we want a certain answer, and so like that can kind of mess with it. So you have to be really clear-minded when you're speaking to your intuition, but it will speak very loudly and undeniable when you are in physical or emotional danger, or someone of a loved one too. It'll speak loudly that too. But that is the number one thing I would say to anyone at Little Justin or any other little people out there. It would be to develop your intuition, because it will guide you to the life of your dreams.
Okay. So I know you said you don't have like social media and stuff like that. So where can we find you or your book?
Yeah. So I might get on. So I don't know if there's a clamoring I might get, but I've been social media free for about 4 years now. And that's been a big part of the book. Like, you know, kind of like a horse putting on blinders. I think I ran a better race, but, you know, I might get back on it, but at this point I'm not. And so there's 2 ways to get a hold of me. So the book is on Amazon. You can search my name, Justin L. Shaw, or you can search the word Sourcery with a U. And so it's Sourcery 101, 13 Rungs. And it looks like this here. That's what it looks like. So you can search the word Sourcery. Don't put in Sourcery 101. For some reason, I'm trying to work with them. If you put in Sourcery 101, it autocorrects it to the actual Sourcery. And then it will lead you to a series of books, which are apparently about becoming a better wizard, which might be interesting, but it's not my book. So search for my name or just the word Sourcery, and this book should pop up at some point. So that's on Amazon. And then you can get a hold of me. I have 500 free ebooks if you can't afford a book. I just want to get the information out there. Like I said, this is just kind of the foundation launch pad for where I want to go. So I'm not big on, you know, I don't really care about sales as much as I want to get it out there. So I have 500 free ebooks that I can send you a code. So you can get that on my email, which is sorcerer13 with a U. So SOUCERER13 at Gmail, or Telegram sorcerer13 as well. SOUCERER 13 on Telegram and Gmail.
Awesome. Well, Justin, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast.
Thank you. Aho.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your conscious of the brain to get in the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality. Whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms, or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean?
You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.